Canada is in big trouble. I'll read you this article here. It says Moody's downgrades Canadian banks. It's the beginning of the end for the housing market here in Canada. Credit rating agency Moody's Investors Service downgraded Canada's big six banks on Wednesday evening, citing concerns about soaring household debt and housing prices. Toronto Dominion Bank, Bank of Montreal, Bank of Nova Scotia, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, and the National Bank of Canada and the Royal Bank of Canada had their ratings on two key metrics lowered by one notch, Moody's announced. Continued growth in Canadian consumer debt and elevated housing prices leaves consumers and Canadian banks more vulnerable to downside risk facing the Canadian economy than in the past, David Beatty, a senior vice president at Moody's, said in a statement. Well, the thing is one of the things, Canada was relying upon their softwood industry. Canada has a tremendously powerful softwood industry. And there's Trump put a not an embargo, but a tariff on the softwood industry, and they're finding that very hard. But not only that, the housing market, particularly up in the Ontario region of Canada, is beyond bizarre. Houses can go for millions of dollars, or at least $1 million wouldn't buy you a house that, if you were someplace like, say, West Virginia, you could buy the same house for like $20,000 or something, you know? No, maybe not quite that cheap, but probably $40,000 or something. You could buy the same house in Toronto area selling for, say, $1.2 million. And the thing is that money, you say, well, that money's not worth as much, and that is true, but it's still worth 70% of what the United States, or 73% of what the United States money is worth. So a $1.2 million in Canadian money is still worth about $900,000 American, you know, and that's still an awful lot of money, $900,000. You can buy one heck of a nice house in the United States for $900,000, but it doesn't get you a nice house in around Ontario. And this is just completely overinflated. This is just beyond bizarre, the prices they've driven real estate up in around these regions of Canada. And it's ready to pop. It's ready to pop, and when it pops, so is the Canadian economy. The Canadian economy is going to pop with it. And Canada, when this whole thing pops here in Canada, it has to pop, because it's one of the biggest bubbles there ever been in the history of the world. It's as big a bubble as a tulip mania. The housing industry here in Canada is as big a bubble as a tulip mania. And when it pops, Canada is going to be a Venezuela. Look at Venezuela. That's what's coming. That's what's coming. It's going to come here first before it comes to the United States, I think. I think Canada's going to pop first. And Canada is, you know, there is an entire possibility that Canada could pop the United States. We are a very close neighbor to the United States, and we're a big country, not a small country. And the United States is so ready to pop along with Canada. I mean, it'd be like two big bathwater bubbles, you know, popping. One little one pops a big one next to it because they're both ready to go. Who got us into this situation is these liberals. The Obama administration, when Obama first went into the Obama administration, the national debt wasn't that great. It wasn't that high. He compiled more debt than every president leading up to him. He compiled more debt. He put more debt on the books. So Trump didn't start the fire. Trump did not start the fire. When he came in, the fire was already burning, and Obama's the guy that lit it. Trump's got to deal with this now. He's got to deal with this raging fire of debt that's consuming everything. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. This is a legacy Obama's left Trump. He's left him a legacy of the swamp plus this enormous debt that's ready to pop. And so Trump's doing his best, but he's coming under fire at every inch of the way by the same people who supported this liberal administration that's caused so much trouble. This administration, they came in and to be quite honest, the first thing they started to do was to sign in legislation to destroy all the freedoms that Americans worked so hard for hundreds and hundreds of years to have. Freedoms and rights. Rights of habeas corpus, rights so that they can't come and just arbitrarily grab you off the street and waterboard you. So Obama made it all possible that they can. They can come in and grab you from your house in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock in the morning, pull you out and waterboard you while you haven't even woken up. And they don't even need to have a court order to do this. And Obama made all this possible. Thank Obama. And he's also made it so that Trump has this huge problem to deal with. And then if that's not enough, then they're on the sides of this whole thing, doing things to try to threaten Trump and make him feel like he's not welcome. Things like holding up an effigy of his head all covered, soaked in blood, and showing it to the world, showing it to his son and everything else, you know. Things like that. When he's got this big problem to deal with that they gave him, then they're going to kick him in the butt, too, and do stuff like this to him. They should be ashamed of themselves. The man's trying to do his best to pull America out of its depths of despair and problems. Now Canada is getting ready to go down the toilet hole, to be quite honest. And our Prime Minister went over there and he signed that lousy agreement, that Paris Accord agreement. That's only going to make things worse. It's all peer pressure to sign that agreement. It's all peer pressure. It's all yielding to peer pressure. Trump's the only one that had enough chutzpah to say no. And they tried to coerce him. One of them come over and grabbed his hand and tried to squeeze the guts out of his hand. Now, it probably hurt Trump a little bit. He squeezed him like he's a maniac. He's almost as big a maniac as the ones holding the heads. You know? Maybe not quite, but it's getting right up there. And what's he trying to do? Intimidate. That's what they're trying to do. Intimidate. And yes, they are very intimidating. Bloody, soaked heads and everything. This is stuff ISIS does. You know? And they're being intimidating. And here Canada's getting ready to go down the drain and become the next Venezuela. And America's got themselves into this situation, and Trump might not be able to get them out in time. Trump needs help. Instead of everybody causing him consternation and causing him problems, in doing all this stuff like it's all really amounts to a bunch of shenanigans. It reminds me of the stuff that they used to do on Halloween night when they'd egg people's houses and stuff like that. And finally, the police would have to get on to them in the end and say, hey, you know, you even though it's Halloween night, you can't do this stuff. You're going too far. Like, you know, you can't light a person's house on fire just because it's Halloween night. The police would have to get on to them and throw them in the poogie, throw them in jail. Because they're going too far. This is the way that they're starting to go now, blocking this administration and with their resentment and their evil hatred toward the U.S. president. He has authority, just like in court. When you go to court, they say, all stand and rise before the judge. This would be like if you had a bunch of people that won't stand and rise before the judge, and in fact, they tried to spit on the judge. They're in contempt. Well, in this case, these people are becoming at the point where they're going to start to become in contempt of the presidency of the United States. I don't know what the exact legal words are for that when they start to do that, but I do know it's wrong. It's very wrong. And they need to adjust their attitudes, and they need to quit with this stuff. They're starting to go too far. Well, they were going too far in the beginning when they started it all anyway. But now they're really starting to get nuts. Totally loony. Anyway, so Canada's in trouble here. Getting back to Canada, and if they have this housing bust in around the Ontario region, and and it looks very likely that they will, Canada is going to be in serious financial trouble, and their dollar could go into a hyperinflation. It's already dropped from par with the United States dollar down to 73 cents or 72 cents. Or I think this morning it was about 74. But it could drop awful quick if this housing bubble bursts. The Canadian dollar could drop down below 50, 40s, 40 cents even, 30 cents. And food prices could soar here in Canada, and what that would lead to more hyperinflation here in Canada, and go into an actual hyperinflation here in Canada. Very quickly that could happen if this situation were to unfold. It says, Moody's noted that debt held by consumers and private businesses in Canada has ballooned to 185% of GDP at the end of 2016, up from 179.3% in 2015. That's a lot of additional debt in a short period of time, and we don't quite know how well household balance sheets would hold up under a serious recession, the agency noted. The downgrade has a warning shot to Canadian financial institutions, but it's unlikely to have a significant direct impact on them. In other words, they're not going to listen. It's a warning shot. It says this downgrade is a warning shot to Canadian financial institutions. And it says, but it's unlikely to have a significant direct impact on them. In other words, they're not going to listen. In other words, the warning shots went off, and none of them are going to be listening. And so you know what happens when people don't listen, when they've been warned and they don't listen. So this is a big problem that's unfolding. I'm going to stay right on top of it. Of course I'm going to stay on top of it because I live here in Canada. You know? And we're the biggest neighbor to the United States. We're a bigger neighbor to the United States than Mexico. And we're to the north, and I wonder what's happening in the Mexican economy. Anyway, thank you for listening. Like and subscribe. Hey, we'll catch you in the next article. Bye, guys.